Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now this is a GTX 760. It has 2GB of VRAM and was launched in 2013 as a mid-range card. These days it can be found on eBay for around $100 to $120 for this specific version, or perhaps a little bit cheaper if you're good at hunting out those deals. It's quite a power hungry card and requires a 500W PSU with an 8 and 6 pin connector, and it also supports SLI, and it's still a card that I would recommend today for any budget gaming setup. This is a mini GTX 1050 from MSI. This is a low profile card that will fit in almost any system, and thanks to its low 75W power consumption and 300W PSU requirement, it is an ideal choice for any system. So I've decided to compare these two today, as on paper there's an 8% performance difference and you can find them for a pretty similar price. So if you're in the market for a GPU and you have around $100 to spend, and it just so happens to be between the 760 and 1050, not to mention I'm actually using the 760 as the comparison because I've actually borrowed it from my friend Darren and will probably have to give it back pretty soon. Which one of these should you buy? Well, let's find out and get into a few games. So first up we tested GTA 4 with the high settings at 1080p. On the 760 the game ran at 80 frames per second on average with 54 minimum, and it was a pretty decent smooth experience with no major hiccups. Over on the 1050, and again it was a similar experience, this time hitting 85 FPS on average with a slightly higher minimum frame rate of 59. Now I could feel here that some of the stuttering that may have occurred on the 760 was definitely ironed out, and it was a more playable experience with this card. Moving on to Far Cry Primal, and although the GPU is definitely a bottleneck here, the 760 struggled quite a little bit as well, with 30 FPS on average at the ultra settings and 22 FPS minimum. I would definitely recommend turning the settings down if you're planning on buying one of these cards, but for the purpose of these tests we kept the settings at ultra, and on the GTX 1050 it actually handled it a little bit better with 35 FPS average and 27 FPS minimum, although I'd recommend turning the settings probably down to medium on both of these cards for the best experience. Moving on to Crysis III, and the 760 hit 55 on average with 34 minimum. This again was more than playable, and I could happily use the 760 all day with this i5 4460 and 8GB of DDR3 RAM. Over on the GTX 1050, and although we saw an increase in average frame rate, we saw a drop in the minimum frame rate, and I could definitely feel that there was more stuttering occurring in the gameplay, which was a little bit more off-putting. Finally, with Overwatch, we limited the frame rate to 70 to see if both of these cards could maintain that figure, and both of which did so very well, with the minimum frame rate actually just dropping by 1 to about 69. Pretty much perfect on both cards. So, which one should you buy? Well, I'm going to have to recommend the 1050. Even if it is a little bit more expensive, you still will get driver support for it, and it just uses so much less power. Having said that, if you can find a GTX 760 that is a lot cheaper than a 1050, you would have no problem with that whatsoever, as the 760 is still a more than capable card. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, this little comparison between a once mid-range card and a fairly new budget one. If you did, leave a like down below. If you didn't, leave a dislike. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and as always, I hope to see you in the next one.